Coming up on the Up and Up.
Do I always have to make you proud? Like, can I also disappoint you? Can I also make a mistake?
If you're constantly thinking, I'm lucky to be here, they're just gonna throw you lucky crap all the time. Oh, you're lucky to be here, do all this extra work. Oh, you're lucky to be here, I'm not gonna promote you as fast.
My little love is if you take the E from the word emotion, you just have the word motion.
Living in a country where you literally were written into law as 3/5 of a human being. So Black excellence became this aspiration.
Hey there, Risers and Thrivers. I'm Janine, I'm your host, and this is On the Up and Up. Here, we've created a safe space to get real, make connections, and share stories that matter. No gatekeeping, no filters, just the truth. Welcome to On the Up and Up.
Now, to the topic of today's discussion, Black excellence. It is a term that is often celebrated as a testament to the extraordinary achievement of Black individuals. And while the concept inspires pride and resilience, it's also tied to perfectionism. It is an unrelenting demand to exceed expectations and to overcome systemic barriers. So the question is, at what cost does that come at? What impact does the pursuit of greatness have on our mental health and overall well-being? And do we need to redefine Black excellence? Can we just call it excellence? Things for you all to think about. With me are three incredible women that are the epitome of excellence. So I really don't want to talk anymore. I want to hand the floor over to each of them to introduce themselves. So we'll start off with Shani. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Ooh, am I on? Yes. Hi everyone. My name is Shani St. Louis, and I'm from the UK. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be part of this topic and to be able to share with you all. What's my background? I am a lover of all things mental health. So I have, 22 years experience now in the world of mental health. So I'm a trained psychiatric nurse and also a trained cognitive behavior therapist. And in Berlin, I work as a psychological counselor, and I have an organization that's called Mindhurst, and the purpose of my organization is to support international students and grantees, so looking out for their well-being and their mental health while they're daring excellence and trying to study abroad. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, hard to go after that because you have quite the resume.
You too.
Excellence is love. I answered the question. My name is Adiola Ogunwale. As you can hopefully hear from my accent, I'm not from Berlin, originally from the States, but have been living here now for almost 9 years. Scary to see. I lead pricing and value-added services product management for the Amazon Freight Partner Program. Ooh. I love it when people think logistics is sexy. But in reality, what it is trying to seed the next generation of transport and logistics companies in Europe. So I get to work with a lot of entrepreneurs and help make their dreams come true. Prior to that, I worked in a lot of different commercial roles, primarily in the education space. So I think for me, it's been always really important helping people achieve their dreams, whatever they may be, and playing a small part in terms of making that happen.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for this opportunity for me to be here today, and also from my side, welcome to the audience. I think you all look amazing. So my name is Sally. I work in marketing, in fashion marketing. I do campaign management, project management, and also recently, since a few months, I've been doing some influencer marketing as well. But what I also do on the side for the last few years is work in the Idea Pitch team. So what we do at Idea Pitch, to put it maybe as brief and concise as possible, is our vision and our mission is to create an ecosystem and support Black entrepreneurship and Black ownership. We do that with many different projects. I think one of the biggest ones is our big Idea Pitch event that we do every year. And actually we are already preparing this year for next year's big event. And I'm very happy to be here.
Okay. Really, so grateful to have all of you here for this conversation. And right off the bat, to each of you, Black excellence, do we need to retire that term? Do we need to redefine it? Or are we keeping it as is? And what does Black excellence mean to each of you? Go for it.
Oh, okay. What was it? Retire?
Retire, redefine, leave it.
We'll leave it. I think we should be careful with it.
Ooh, okay.
That's what I think. I think when I thought about what it means to me, I think it's definitely like a set of standards that were placed on me, some internal, some external, to try and ensure that I could walk in a world that wasn't made for me. I think that's what I experienced. And I think there are times when that makes me feel really proud and accomplished when I achieve that. But there are also times when I feel the pressure of it and the mental strain. So yeah, I think we need to be careful with the term.
Okay. Adiola?
Sure. I'm really hesitant in terms of what to do with the term because I think it represents an idea. Like, I'm an American, and America is an idea. That I think has always been kind of the prevalence behind it is, can we achieve this concept behind it? Now, right now has been an interesting time to see where we have been for that idea. But I think specifically for Black Americans, having this idea of living in a country where you literally were written into law as 3/5 of a human being. So Black excellence became this aspiration to find your wholeness behind it. Now I think it gets misconstrued with a lot of pressure to not only be whole, but be better than. And I always get scared when I think of the concept of better than, because you're constantly then also thinking of subjugation. So even within the Black community, how do we see ourselves comparative to others? How do we potentially differentiate in ways, potentially put others down? So for me, excellence has this double-edged sword. I'm probably in favor of moving away from the term, but it's that struggle of while you're also looking to achieve, you potentially are pushing others away.
Fair. Yeah, that's completely understandable, and I can see that perspective a lot, but I also wanted to also hand it to Sally.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
What are the three options again?
We are
Redefine?
we are redefining it,
Yeah.
retiring it, or we're leaving it as it is.
I would say we can leave it as it is, to be honest. And I think I might be, at least in this panel, one of the only ones with this opinion. Because I like the term Black excellence. I'm all for it. And also this is something that we stand for in the idea pitch team. And how I would define Black excellence is, and as much as I also see the toxic sides of it, like the pressure and the perfectionism, the expectation that comes with it, I would say when I think about the word Black excellence, I see a sense of pride, a pride in celebration of achievement, celebration of success within the Black community. And for example, when I hear a story, a success story of someone, especially maybe a woman, because I'm all for the girls, I'm like, yes, go girl, I'm proud of you. And when I even hear or see that this person, this woman is a Black woman, I'm like, yes, you go girl. Yeah. I celebrate both of these success stories, but the second one fills me with pride because I also identify as a Black woman, I identify with the Black community, and I think this term Black excellence fosters a sense of community. And especially in Germany, we need to kind of take care of this Black community that we have and also celebrate and push ambition and just be there for each other and cheer each other on. So I think this is the feeling I get when I hear the term Black excellence.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think there's a bit of a cultural nuance to the term Black excellence. So when we were having dinner together and we were talking about the experience in Germany and really not having the representation there at all whatsoever, and then versus us from the US and the UK, we've had role models. We've seen that there was a point with like 90s sitcom and TV where there was really beautiful examples of excellence within the Black community that was being displayed, and then it kind of fell away. And what I'm actually kind of curious about, because each of you sort of touched on it in the conversation, was this aspect of pressure. So how has the pressure revealed itself within your life, personally? And then I'll come to you as well from a mental health perspective.
Maybe I can go next. Yeah, I can go first. So how it has conveyed for me or displayed for me in terms of pressure, I can give you an example. It's maybe a bit of a random one, but stick with me. I can tie it together with the topic of this panel. So maybe some of you have seen me recently on Netflix. I was on a Netflix show called Love is Blind Germany. And maybe you already know the format. It's quite popular in the US and in other countries, and they did the first version of it in Germany. And I applied for the show. I was called on to be on the show. And also at that time, I had a mentor, and I was really in touch with her, talking to her a lot about my doubts and my insecurities of me joining or being part of the show as a black woman, because I don't know how it was for you. I was born and raised in Germany, and in the media, I mean, now it's changing, but like a lot of years ago, you wouldn't see black people, black women displayed in a specific way as well. So I was like, I might be the only black person on the show. I might even only be on the show because I'm black and for the diversity quote. So these were like real fears and doubts that I had. And then with me potentially being the only black woman on the show, I would need to represent the black community in Germany, basically. I also went on the show with like being a Christian woman with my faith, and I was quite vocal about it. So I would not only represent the black community, but also the Christian community. So I had both communities on my shoulders, and I'm just being me, and also I'm just kind of navigating through the show. And I mean, that's the case. I mean, I wasn't the only black person on the show. It was 3 other beautiful black women and also some men. But even afterwards, like so many people come up to me. I received so many messages of people saying, "Oh, Sally, we love to see you on the show. You did such an amazing job. You represented us well. We are so proud of you." And as much as I'm like, yay. And as much as I'm like, yes, I'm happy. I'm also proud of myself, to be honest. But I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to make anyone proud, like a whole community. And I think as black people, especially also being maybe one of the few in specific rooms, in specific situations and areas, we necessarily, like, we can't even decide, but we have to make our community proud. We have to represent for us. And I'm also asking myself, like, do I always have to make you proud? Like, can I also disappoint you? Can I also make a mistake? Can I also fall down sometimes? So I think this maybe answers your question of the pressure being on, like, in the business world, but also in any area of life, in media, in private life. As soon as you are somewhere where there's maybe a heightened visibility on you and you are the only person of a minority group, you have the pressure of representation.
Yeah, there was
Definitely.
I think there's a lot that you said there that I totally resonated with, and I think having worked primarily in corporate spaces, just oftentimes getting to specific challenges in my career where I constantly looked up and was like, how am I the highest ranking black woman here? And I'm like, this is not the 1800s, you know, where like, I'm like Sojourner Truth and like trying to like overcome a lot. And it still was happening into the 2000s and then 2020s, like constantly being, I'm the first, I'm still a trailblazer, I'm still a pilgrim in this area, how is this happening? And so you have that pressure of just literally people coming up to you being like, you're the first. I've been waiting with all these questions to kind of answer, represent, and so you have to speak now for a community because they're ignorant, they haven't had that experience. But I used to always joke with a friend on the second part that you mentioned of just like, can I just let people down? It's like, I would love to start a program for black people called Be Average.
No facts though.
Like,
I don't know if you'd get funding. I think funding was
like, because there are so many other communities that are fine with like, yeah, we're average, and like, that was good.
That part.
And also the, like, statistically, if we actually saw black people as being average, that would be an accomplishment in many cases. So how much effort do we need to put into this excellence that we could just put into just being, rather than always having to kind of represent something to other people?
You know, 100%. And one of the things that there's another aspect of it as well that I remember I was sitting in another panel discussion and the person had said, yeah, but I have to show them that I'm not like the others or show them that I'm different. And I thought to myself, how miserable and depressing is that? That we're constantly having, I mean, I'm at a point where I'm kind of like you, I really don't care. Like, you're gonna catch me slipping, you caught me slipping that day, oops. But it's also so sad to hear that from another person who feels like they constantly have to be kind of doing a little bit of a dance to say, hey, look at me, I'm different. And I can only imagine, I mean, the mental toll that takes on a person. I know for myself in the work environment, feeling like I always have to be at 150%, but what if that day I can only give 50? And that's my 100% for the day. So from your perspective as a mental health counselor and psychologist and all of these things, how have you seen this come to fruition in the people you deal with?
Yeah, no, good question. I think first of all, I think sadly the statistics are unfortunate when it comes to just black people accessing mental health in general, right? So not unfortunately, we have mainly from the US, but for example in 2022, a study said that 25% of blacks are accessing mental health versus 40% of whites accessing treatment that they need. And that to me is concerning, right? Because it's not saying, oh no, we're okay, and that's why we don't need it. It's saying, we don't even know how to access it. And I think sometimes we also don't know how to verbalize the pressures that we're talking about in order to see them as not even clinical, but just concerning enough to get some help, you know? And I think one of the things I often see is what we call somatization, which is really that idea of we struggle to, it's when psychological distress comes through physical complaints or concerns, right? And you see that quite a lot. People are like, oh my gosh, I just keep getting bad headaches, or I'm just not sleeping, or I've got back pains, or even like things like heart palpitations, and not recognizing, hey, there's something psychological that's happening here and that's going on. So I think it comes out in that. I feel like there are two streams. I feel like within Black excellence, sometimes when we have to be careful with it, it's when we have unmet expectations. So we have these big expectations on ourselves, particularly when you're the only one in spaces. You have these big expectations, but sometimes they're unmet. So they're failed because of whatever reason. And then I think on the other side, we have massive uncertainty of like, will I make it? Will I be able to keep going? Is this imposter syndrome a real thing? Is someone gonna catch me out? And I think these two streams bring about two different things, what I see in the practice. And I think with unmet expectations, I often see people feeling really disappointed in themselves, right? And then that turns into often shame, that turns into depression if they're not careful. That's one stream. And I think with the uncertainty, it turns into things like anxiety, right? It turns into this constant worry of the what if the worst happens, what if the fear comes true. So I think that's how it manifests in the mental health world.
And how does someone actually cope with it and manage that? Because I feel like today we hear everyone's going to therapy, everyone's doing these things, and sometimes it feels or sounds very performative in a lot of ways. Like you wake up in your morning, you do your 5-minute meditation, okay, but like, how do we actually cope with it with a method that's actually going to help?
Yeah, good question. I have, so those two streams, so the unmet expectations and the uncertainty, two people come to mind, and I'll maybe share them with you. Unmet expectations. I had a student, and she was a North African student, and she basically had to extend her studies because she was struggling to manage paying for her studies because her parents had kind of given her so much money, and she was like, hey, now I want to try and do this last bit. So she was trying to do that by herself. She was also the oldest of her siblings, so she had this pressure of, I need to make this work, not only for me, but so my siblings can kind of come after me. And she was really struggling. She was struggling being in a majority white space in terms of where her university was, and was struggling to know how to ask for help. And she kept saying to me, Shani, it's so interesting because everyone they ask for help. Like they're struggling, they don't know what to do, they email the professor. And she's like, but I can't. And I was like, why can't you, you know? But it was really just this idea of, I expect that I should be able to manage this, and I don't wanna show up any other way. And that's the expectation that she placed on herself. And sadly, what that snowballs into things like her having a conversation with her mom, and her mom saying, how's everything going back in Berlin? And she's like, yeah, it's okay, it's going well. And invalidating actually what she was feeling, right? Not being able to acknowledge like, no, it's hard and I'm struggling. So I think that's what I saw. And that then unfortunately led her to get into quite a depressed space where she was no longer engaging in the community. She struggled to kind of get the extension for the studies that she needed. She struggled to admit that she needed to tell her family, like, hey, I need some extra support. So I think that's how the unmet expectations. And then the other story that comes to mind with uncertainty is she was a PhD student, amazing lady, came from America, very much the epitome of Black excellence. And she came to me with anxiety, and she was like, I am really struggling in my workplace. I'm in this job and I know I should be here. I'm like doctoral level, but I'm struggling because when I step outside of my workplace and I'm in the streets, I struggle with German. And I think this is a really important thing because she was like, as an adult, I know how to be excellent in the areas that I've worked all my life to be excellent in. And now I have to try and learn another language. And she was like, it's too painful. She was like, it's too painful. And it's making me anxious. Yeah. And I'm feeling like I'm not giving my true sense to people because I can't articulate myself. But what was happening is that uncertainty of those situations was spilling out. So she was at work and struggling to get the things that she even knew she knew. And I think that's another example. Yeah.
Definitely. Wild to say, but both of those really hit home. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to need a minute to digest that. I've got a follow-up question for you, but I actually wanted to go back to your point about, can I just be average? Mm-hmm. And to both of you, you're both well into the corporate world, both climbing up the ladder. I've climbed the ladder. At one point, I even remember you saying you felt like you had reached as far as you can go in the corporate world. And then your father inspired you to show you could go further. You know how parents do, right? They will do that.
Nigerian father, just so.
So that's why my question is, how do you protect your peace while being so ambitious and still striving for so much at the same time? Because it's a lot of pressure, like we've just said, but it's also fulfilling too, right? And you do want to be representative, so yeah.
I struggle with that term.
Okay.
Yeah, because that falls under a wellness category, protect your peace. I don't know, just my natural instinct behind all of those is to bristle just because it feels like a Band-Aid.
Okay.
It feels like it wasn't really until last year when I had to deal with like a pretty significant health issue. Because again, when you're doing the climb on the corporate sense, everybody's telling you like, how do you manage stress? How do you manage all of these different things? And so you try to put in all of these different applications to say, okay, how can I be more productive? Let me manage my calendar better. Great, that's one aspect. Okay, let me be really intentional about the relationships that I have and who I'm spending time with, because maybe then that'll give me more focus. Let me make sure that I focus on the projects that I'm working on. Again, all of these things to kind of manage through what is incredible stress. And it wasn't until I had this moment where I was like, okay, my body is literally telling me I have to stop something. And I was listening and trying to just learn more in terms of like, what could I actually do to kind of overcome this? And it wasn't until I heard from like a podcast, I think, around this where it was, you know, think about these tools to not only manage stress, but remove stress.
And what were some of these tools? Asking for a friend.
Yeah, but I think the main one was like, you have to condition yourself to stop. So like this preserving your peace, to me, why I struggle with it is still again, I'm going to do different tools to kind of manage through this difficult situation versus if I'm in a difficult situation, maybe I need to remove myself from this difficult situation. And I think that's tough because especially if you're trying to compare that from a work standpoint, so much of your identity is tied into this.
Yeah.
So for me, like it was really hard because again, I climbed. I'm in positions where I'm reporting either into a board or into a president, or I'm the face of something. I'm literally having people come up to me being like, you're the reason why I took this large decision in my life. Amazing things, which is incredible. But for me to be in those spaces, I'm not sleeping, I'm not eating, not taking care of myself, not having the types of relationships that I want to. So it's great that I'm having impact, but that's also impacting my body. So I had to have like a real conversation of, I'm loving this identity that I have, but it's killing me. Which one do you want? Wow. So for me, the preserving your peace is like, think of some of these things almost in life or death, not to make it dramatic, but also just, some of it has to stop to kind of end it. And like, you're really gonna have to have those difficult conversations to really see what is your priority and maybe disassociate some of the excellence from identity, that you can still put the excellence in other places.
All right, wow, that was a sermon.
It sounds like the difference between like self-care and self-preservation.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta preserve.
Yeah.
And how's that been for you, Sally?
Yes, but I think also maybe adding to what you just said, sometimes it's just very hard to just say, okay, stop. For me, for example, I can speak from my own experience. I'm like a very highly ambitious girl, I would say. Working in the corporate world, now I kind of know the politics and the game a little bit, but I used to give a lot of a shit. And I really noticed that you can't give too much of a shit, otherwise you will crumble because there's so much pressure. And especially if you're very ambitious and you want to climb up the ladder and you want to succeed, at least in my case, I was like super, super fixed on being perfect and making everything the right way. I mean, I think at some point, if you Google imposter syndrome or anxiety, my face would pop up because no, I was the definition of that. And sometimes I still catch myself in these tendencies, and it just shows in like small things, like sending an email. I can send an email, but I would be so fixated on sending the perfect email. Yeah. I would write the email, put it in ChatGPT, ask it how first. Guys, I'm next level with this. First, I ask ChatGPT, how does it sound? It tells me how it sounds, then I tell it more professional, more nice, more this. And then I copy it, I put it into the email, I still rewrite it somehow, and then, like just for one email, I could write 10 emails in the time I write one email. And then at some point, I'm just like, I think one tip I would give to everyone is open up to people, because when you really open up and people also open up to you, you will realize that everyone is having the same struggles some kind of way. And everyone's pretending like they know what they're doing, but they don't know shit. They don't know as much as you think that they know. So yeah.
Yeah. No, 100% agree. I mean, from the aspect of opening up to others, which is so hard to do, especially when you're coming from this, you don't want to ask for help or you don't really want to be vulnerable, because we're oftentimes not allowed to be vulnerable, right? Because it's a sign of weakness or you're overreacting. There's so many levels to it. And then also the aspect of self-preservation as well. And even personally, I can relate to that because kind of like you, highly ambitious girly, striving, but then at one point I got numb. I did not care about anything that I was doing anymore. I got an opportunity to do a TEDx. I was like, cool, great. I didn't really bother to prep for it. Please don't watch the video. Yeah. You can tell I didn't prep for it. We'll talk about it later. Yeah, I got you. I know. But I remember being so numb after a while, and this was last year, and I was like, I just don't care. None of the things that I was striving for anymore actually made a difference. I did not care. And then realizing the priorities were shifting, my values were changing. I cared more about, I need a community. I worked so dang hard. I didn't really have that much friends in Berlin. Like, what have I been doing, you know? So I wanted to bring it to you from the perspective of a counselor. What are practical tools and tips, like 3 things that maybe someone could start with today to help themselves?
Yeah, I feel like mental health is very much like physical health. So the way in which we view our physical health, we can do the same. And if that was the case, I would say just try to be observant, right? Like be observant to yourself. On a physical level, I know if I bend down and my side hurts, I'm like, gotta work on my stretches. Or if my stomach bloats after white processed bread, I'm like, okay, I need to think about what I'm eating. Like, I observe how my body is feeling. And I think in the same way with your mind, like, the things to observe, I would say was, observe your thoughts. What do you notice? How do you talk to yourself, right? Are you that friend? Are you that coach? Are you that critical teacher? Like, what voice is inside your head, I would say. That's important. Check in with your feelings and validate them. It is really okay. I'm not saying that feelings should stick around. They're actually meant to be transient, right? My little love is if you take the E from the word emotion, you just have the word motion, okay? This is to remind us, right? Our emotions have to move. They move through us and they help us to move, right? Not to be kept and kind of held onto. So think about your feelings. And then the third one, think about what you're doing. Think about the behaviors that you're doing, right? Are you missing out on community? And you should be really thinking about that. Those would be my tips. And maybe a little concept that kind of rings what we've just been said there. There's a psychologist called Paul Gilbert, and he talks about emotional regulation systems. So there are 3 systems that he talks about. There is the drive system, which is this one right here, Black excellence, like I'm going for it. And there is the threat system, which is the fight or flight. I'm anxious, I need to protect myself, right? And a lot of those 2 systems help to activate us. There is a 3rd system that deactivates us, that brings us down, that helps us reset. It's called the soothing system. And most of us only really remember that, or if we do, we're thinking about childhood. We're thinking about when we were young, when we were able just to like, how do you want to feel comfortable? How do you want to relax? How do you want to connect? And I would encourage you guys, remember those 3 systems, like take time to soothe yourself.
Those are all amazing tips. And yeah, feel free to give a round of applause. I see some of y'all. Yeah. And those are all phenomenal tips. And I think the other aspect of it when we're talking about tools and taking care of yourself and being able to be vulnerable is this thing that makes me wonder, which is the term Black excellence oftentimes is rooted in, I would say, racist stereotypes and ideologies of us never being good enough. And for a long time, we were always trying to get a seat at the table. There were people maybe trying to help us have seats at the table. Is where we saw a lot of DI initiatives, which are obviously not only for the Black community, but for the betterment of all. But right now, we're of course seeing a pushback on that. And honestly, it's also been super devastating to see what's going on in the world as well. And so the question that comes to my mind is, do we still need to be fighting for a seat at the table? Or is it time to just say, you know what? I'm gonna just make my own table. If you wanna join us, we're welcoming, but I'm gonna be over here. So, yeah. I heard one make my own table, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think we talked about this a bit, and I'm super fascinated and oddly very excited about all of the changes that are happening against this like concept of diversity. Because I'm just waiting for the implosion to happen. And I know that's horrible and it's going to be radically destructive. A lot of people are going to be hurt, but it'll be seen. Because I think it's in the back of a lot of people's heads, like nagging at them, being like, oh, you know, are these people enough? How do I feel interacting with these people? What would it look like? And we'll all get to see what it looks like. But I think this concept that people were lesser than because you were trying to include them is just interesting. So waiting just to see the fallout from it, and like it's already starting to happen, so like we'll see where that takes us. But I think going back to maybe like your broader question of just like, should we ask for a seat at the table, make our own table? I think the concept of the table is wrong, because to me that's still taking us towards the like, I'm trying, I'm striving, I'm doing. Like one thing that I love but also is a little bit scary is like telling a little bit about my age. I grew up before social media.
So me too.
There we go. So I know what it's like to be bored. I know what it's like to like not have my life for consumption at all points in time, or looking for consumption at all points of time. And I think many people growing up now only have that. And so even if it's not saying I want corporate job and being an elder millennial who's just like, strive or else I don't know else to look, you still then are gonna be like, I see this other person on social media. Should I be an influencer and be like them because they build a following? And who am I if I don't have followers? Like it's wild to think about that as a concept. So I think even when we say set your own table, I think that's still setting this unrealistic expectation. So I still push towards the like.
Can it be a chair?
I'd actually call it a divan.
Okay.
Maybe a nice picnic blanket, relax, chill, yeah.
Relax. But I think it's really, like, it's hard work. And I think we had this weird period of time during COVID to kind of do it. And we all saw how difficult it was when you're sitting with yourself with your thoughts. And like, oh my gosh, how noisy is my head?
Yeah.
What do I actually want? Ugh. I think some people got through breakthroughs there. Other people found that it was so difficult. But that's the direction I think we need to go, is less of seat at the table, your own table, rooted in yourself. Like, what do you actually want? It's a very hard question to answer, but push more towards that.
Yeah. I completely understand where I mean, I've grown up only with social media, so I can't fathom a world without the internet. We kind of talked about that. We can discuss that later.
Actually, I have a question.
Yeah.
Who used to meet their friends without cell phones? Who remembers that? Like, you just had to wait, right? Like, would they?
Good old days.
The good old days.
Yeah, I can't fathom. I don't, like, where you at? Like, send me your location. What you mean? Just show up. Like, what?
We were more on time.
Wait, what?
Yeah, but bringing it back to where we're at again, like whether it's a seat at the table, creating a new table, not having tables at all. I also wanted to ask you as well, Sally. I mean, how do you see it? And also, I mean, through the work that you're doing with IDEA, it's also about uplifting diaspora entrepreneurs. So, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the analogy of the table. But if we go with this, I would say we need both. So we need a seat at the table, and then we also need our own table and our own chairs and whatever. But I would like to call them room. or rooms rather. So what we do at IDEA is exactly that. I'm with you on the age part. I'm also a 90s baby, 97. And I know.
Rude.
Just outing myself right there. But
I already did too. So.
Okay. But even for me, growing up in Germany, there was definitely a lack of role models for sure. And I think I can specifically speak about Germany, like organizations like Idea Pitch, but also Boldly, ADA Network. There's so many different organizations which I highly support, which are already doing the work of making and creating these rooms for us as a community. But what we do at IDEA is, like I previously mentioned, we want to create an ecosystem basically for Black entrepreneurship. We do this with different projects. For example, we have the YEC, Young Entrepreneurship Club, which is for the young people. So teenies and young adults, we want to support them because they have great innovative ideas and we want to already push them at a young age. And we also have a big sponsor since last year, Google, where we are launching the Google Tech Booster. And then we do the Idea Pitch event. And it's basically the concept of it is kind of like Shark Tank, or in Germany there's a show called Höhle der Löwen. And we give the big stage to pitch teams. And there's a big stage, a big event with 500 plus people. There's a jury, there's an advisory board, mentorship that we provide to the teams. And they have the opportunity to pitch their business and sometimes only their idea. And yeah, they can win money, a lot of money actually. We have different prizes to support them, but also physical money, and everything comes up to 53,000 euros, which I think is a great sum to reinvest into the business. And I think what I really like also about being part of the team is that we kind of push us and we celebrate us. And actually coming back to the term of celebrating Black excellence, for the very first Idea Pitch event that we did, it was 2022, because we have a theme for every event. And for the very first event, the theme was celebrating Black excellence, actually. And when we came up with the theme, I wasn't part of this discussion, but I was told, we were not aligned in the team. So some of the team members were like, no, let's not go with this term because of the toxicity and the pressure that comes with it. And some of the team members were like, no, let's go with it because that's what we are literally doing with this event. We are celebrating Black ideas, Black innovation. In the end, we went with it, so the theme was celebrating Black excellence, but I think this just goes to show that even as much as we stand behind it, even we can see how this can also be kind of seen in a toxic way.
Yeah, and the work that you guys are doing at IDEA is absolutely phenomenal. So as someone who just was there as an attendee, it was such a vibe. One of the coolest startup events I've ever been to, because if you've been to the typical ones in Berlin, they're pretty like meh. But this one's a vibe, all right? You get dressed up, there's music, the moderator's amazing, and also my startup also participated in it, and it was honestly a booster for us. Like, we were able to run the marketing campaigns that we are running right now simply because of the money that we got through the competition. So you guys are doing amazing work. Yeah. And speaking of IDEA, it's also about creating role models and highlighting these role models. And so this is where I also wanted to ask about the role models and maybe even the pressures or the positive around Black excellence that has gotten you to the point today. Like, I know at one point you were talking about your father, so who are the role models that have also propelled you here?
Yeah, I guess so. Maybe threw my dad into it anyway. But yeah, I mean, my dad was definitely someone who really pushed me in ways that maybe made me feel uncomfortable. We had a really interesting relationship, so he passed away 5 years ago, but we always were kind of talking from like a very theoretical level. Like, we really love to have these like broad discussions, and I always wanted to bring that into work, so I just like use that as a way for me to play and think about big ideas. But one time I actually came to him with like a very small idea where I was living in San Francisco, working in tech, and I thought I had hit my dream. And I was like, you know what, Dad? This is the last job I'm gonna have. Maybe I'll have like one more promotion, but that's it for me. I've done it all. And this is like 15 years ago. And he literally told me, it's like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard you say. I was like, I don't know. And he's like, you really need to think about what your overall impact can be. Like, how are you thinking about this as a promotion? Like, did I train you wrong? Like, all these things, but just thinking more about what I want to do in this world and not just thinking about the next step. So for me, that was the exciting part about Black excellence. It wasn't just thinking about career ladder and what I'm projecting to the world. It was truly like, wait, what is my impact? That I love about Black excellence. That I love about anything dealing with the Black community, thinking about what our overall impact could be. Because I want to be, I may be selfish buying this. Yeah, I think there's more that we can share. So that was just, I don't know, really exciting to have that kind of personal way of thinking about it. And I really trust him for kind of giving me that boost. And that ended up leading to a series of many different events, ultimately leading me here. So yeah, I think even though Black excellence can still be difficult to navigate, having maybe that concept still can propel you to have a lot of these positive impacts in the end.
Definitely.
I can definitely, relate to that. I think mine wasn't my dad, but was my uncle who used to come and do like piano lessons for us. And I remember telling him like what I wanted to be, and he was like, "No, like I think you can do different. I think you
What did
can
you wanna
do." I think I wanted to be an air hostess. And I still think I could be an air hostess. But he, anyway, just didn't think that was where my skills lied. but just having someone look at you and say, actually, I think that you could do something different. I actually think that you could do something more. I actually see bigger in that mind for you based on what they understand you to be. As a young person, that just helped me to see like, oh, there's more than one option. There's more than one door, you know? So I think that's definitely somebody. And I also think this is amazing how different generations can inspire us. Get around kids, guys. If you don't have children in your community, like find some kids, because they're awesome. I have 2 kids, and I will say that my daughter helps me to reach excellence and be proud of it each day. And I think just her concept and how young people and kids see the world, they're kind of like, no, you can do that and that. Like, why are we choosing? Why are we minimizing? So definitely, I think my kids help me to kind of aspire to more.
Beautiful. And how's it for you?
Yes, I wouldn't say I have this one person as the role model, but I would say what kind of pushes me, and it sounds so cliche, but my younger self, kind of. The young Sally, when I look back at 15, 16-year-old Sally, who was maybe a bit confused, not knowing what to do, not seeing herself in specific rooms because like the horizon was just so limited because there just was no visibility. So I would say my younger self pushes me, but then again, I mean, my parents came from Ghana. They had me and my siblings here, so of course there will always be this voice of my parents in the back of my mind that I need to, accomplish something, do something. But I would say just in general, my community around me.
Yeah, that's so true and super relatable as well. Thinking about it from the aspect of my own mother also being like, and my mom's Ghanaian too, being like, okay, you must go, you have to do your best, you can do so much more. I remember when I moved to Germany, I was like, I'm just gonna travel for a year and live my best life. My mom's like, you're gonna get a degree. That's what you're gonna do. Yeah, she wasn't wrong. It turned out to be the best thing, right? But I really wasn't thinking about going that much further, but it helped me to get to where I am today. And the other aspect of it is through the journey of trying to climb the corporate ladder, realizing that kind of bringing it back within myself, away from the external pressures of everything, and really thinking, how can I be a driving force and an impact while making myself still feel good in the process rather than this constant pressure of I've got to be the best. And I know small little antidote to that is through my company. I remember a little girl at the end of the event came over and she's like, oh my God, you also have the magic hair too. She's a little Black girl. And I was like, yeah, I do. And then her mom goes, yeah, and guess what? This is also her company. And you could just see the look in her eye being like, whoa, that's so cool. And so this is also where I wanted to bring it to all of you again. What is your hope for the next generation and also for us as a community as we move forward?
I hope for the next generation and also for us, because I think we're still on a journey as well, regardless of whether you remember life without phones or not. I hope that we will all be true to ourselves. I hope that we will get on a journey of getting to know yourself a little bit deeper. And by that I mean getting to know your strengths, getting to know your weaknesses, getting to know when you can be challenged and what those challenges bring out from you. And I hope that we can be the best at the things that we want to pursue. I hope that for us.
Love it.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it, I don't know if I'm like really just tapped into like what's happening from a political standpoint, but I feel like there's like a veil that has been shed. where when we look at our political leaders, the leaders that we have now, I think everybody's like, oh, this person got that job? That's interesting. And I'm hoping that the next generation is like, okay, if that person can have that job, then I can have anything. So for me, I'm really hopeful for the next generation to just participate. Because it won't be, oh, you have to have this background, or you need to have gone through these schools or this type of path before. You're just literally seeing like, oh, like a comedian is running a country. Like a guy that's on a TV show is running a country. Okay, if that's the floor, shoot. What else can I do?
Yeah.
What else can I participate in to help in better things? And how can I include other people that may, again, have not have thought of themselves in being those places to absolutely say, of course I could be in that place.
Yes, I totally agree with everything, but I would also say that, yeah, my hope for the world or for the future would be, I think it was mentioned also in the beginning, that we won't really need the word Black excellence, and we can just stick with excellence. And then again, that we just have this deep support in our community. And what I also really like and learned in the past few years is I would hope for everyone to be able to show up as their true, authentic self, and that we can also just give room and appreciation for everyone the way they are and cheer each other on. I think that would be very nice for the future.
For sure. Those are all beautiful things, and as we're kind of rounding out the conversation, I think it kind of, you guys all summed it up, right? It's asking the questions of the environment around you, but then also of yourself, of what you truly want, what you truly value. Trying to work on yourself on both a physical and a mental level to make sure that you can show up fully yourself and be who you are. And so with that, I actually wanted to also bring it up to all of you sitting here. Do you have any particular questions or comments from the conversation that you want to? Yeah, I see one hand, second row.
First of all, thank you for this wonderful discussion. You talked a lot about the toxicity around Black excellence, and many times also due to the pressure we feel on an individual level. But I think another aspect of the toxicity is also what we live on a societal level, that we in our own community make average bad. That we in our own community are saying, okay, you're not as good as, so we exclude our own. And how can we change the societal narratives? I think you having this panel here today is already contributing to that, but what other ways can we change the narratives around Black excellence? Because how can we celebrate, let me try and have this question of, how can we celebrate without putting each other down or comparing ourselves and being superior? How can we do that at the same time?
Yeah, I actually think it's really important. We need to, and I think, but rather than creating like a sense of like we're all the average world, I think we do need to give some time to like really looking at people in the community, like in our communities, that maybe the light wasn't shone on them, or the celebration. I mean, I went to the barber earlier today. And obviously, but what I love about the barbers is they are like the unsung heroes, right? It's the place where these young boys, not always boys, but these young people come into this space and they sit in a chair for 20 to 30 minutes. And these barbers are speaking life into them, they're listening to their problems, they are encouraging them, they're just helping them to feel amazing. Like when I see my son go to the barber on his own and this sense of confidence, I think, the barbers helped him get to that place. So I think we do need to like celebrate the people in the community that maybe it doesn't look like they have the degree or the doctorate, but they are helping to like really encourage and bring up the next generation, would be my thing.
Yeah, I would just add to that, like I was having a long conversation about this with a couple of friends. I really would love to see the changed narrative about what is Black. Because I think like what you got at is some of this is societal pressure, like we can say this is systemic racism that's like being placed upon it, but some of it is within the community of just like the concept of the talented 10th. So there's only 10% of Black people that are amazing, then we're literally saying 90% Like all of that is within the Black community, just what we say around ourselves. What is Black? What do we think is good? What is not good? What is a great representation? What is not? It's like you said, of just, there may be unsung heroes, but there also may be just aspects of Blackness that is different. Because I see this a lot within the States of just like, there is a narrative about what is Black and what is not. Even if it's not spoken, and even if many people are trying to say, actually, we're changing that narrative.
Yeah.
There's still kind of this undercurrent of, but that's not really.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't change that, you're never going to be able to change really the narrative of that pressure of what excellence is. So to me, those are the conversations we need to have of just opening up of Blackness can be many things, whether it is thinking about intersectionality and what that means, because I see that being a very still difficult conversation within the Black community, whether it is different types of work and career, but just really having very open, frank, but just embracing all that Blackness can be.
Yeah. And I think piggybacking off of what you said, also the challenge around Blackness is we're not necessarily a specific nationality, we're not specifically a specific religion. We are not a monolith. We are a culmination of so many things. And even if we talk about the US, I remember growing up there with my mom being Ghanaian, but then we're not African American. Mm-hmm. So then we're in our own African community. And then I moved to Germany and I'm thinking, okay, we're all Black. It's like, no, you're not Afro-German though. I'm like, what do y'all want me to do, you know? And I think a major part of it is also meeting it from a perspective of curiosity and openness and embracing each other, being like, yo, we're in this together, because that's one of the biggest aspects that I think is a challenge within our community is sometimes we're pitted against each other internally, which makes it harder for us to all just come up together. You know, if you look at some other cultures, they'd be like, all right, we're all going, you know, like everyone's linking arms and they're all going up there together. And we just, it's generational, it's the history that has gotten us to this point, and now there's a lot for us to work on a personal and a societal level to get to that next level of being one as a group and also embracing the difference in that one. But did you want to add anything as well?
I think you summed it up pretty nicely, everyone. I think it's also about redefining what average is to us. And just like you said, just lending out a hand. And oftentimes I also see that because we are maybe so little in specific rooms, it becomes a thing of competition. And you think that you can be the only Black person to make it in a specific situation. But I think it's just kind of coming away from this mindset of it can only be one or it can only be two, and just embracing that it can be all of us. It can just be everyone together, kind of. Maybe this is maybe a bit too kumbaya, but ultimately just kind of supporting and embracing each other.
Yeah. We probably have time for one more question. Yeah, go for it.
Hi, thank you so much for having this talk, everyone. I love you guys. So growing up in the U.S., my parents, especially my father, taught me you have to be twice as good to get half of what they get. And it was reinforced to me at like such a young age that it's been carried throughout with me through my whole life, especially when I was in college. And I went to a PWI, or primarily white institution. I don't know if you guys know that. And it just kind of follows you, especially I was in STEM as a major, and it just oozes into that whole atmosphere. And sometimes when the high moments came, it's a really good high, like I made it, I did it, but then when the lows hit, it really, really hits you. Like, am I not good enough? Am I not representing my community well enough? So kind of, my question would be, is there really merit in especially teaching people that, especially super young kids, kind of like a saying like that, or should it also be readjusted, like how Black excellence might have to be readjusted?
I have very strong opinions on this.
Go for it.
Like having gone to business school at a predominantly white institution, you find that statement is such a horrible negotiation. Like literally, like I went to, and I had a class in like the art of negotiations behind this. And to go in with the mindset being like, I have to work twice as hard to get half as much, they would laugh you out of the room, being like, your whole goal for this is to be like, I'm working twice as hard to maybe get 3 times as much. Like, it's just not a strong position and mindset to put anyone in to kind of think about yourself in a deficit. Because I think that's where you're starting, is this like, I'm in a deficit mindset. Now, how do I overcome? And you're just never gonna win. You start from that mentality. So, like, I feel very strongly walking away from it. I understand that there will be challenges. Like, I've seen that as, again, being almost every job that I've ever been in, I'm the most senior black woman. So I can't look to my left and right and be like, oh, fine, there's no equivalency that I can pull from. But I can't go into the mindset being like, well, since I'm the only one here, then I just have to be lucky to be here. Because that also influences how you work. Because if you're constantly thinking, I'm lucky to be here, they're just gonna throw you lucky crap all the time. Oh, you're lucky to be here, do all this extra work. Oh, you're lucky to be here, I'm not gonna promote you as fast. Oh, you just feel like you're gracious in terms of this mindset, in terms of everybody else saying, no, I'm not gracious, this is a job. And like this whole contract behind this is I do work, you pay me money. I do more work, you pay me more money. Not I do more work, you pay me less. So I really struggle with that concept of moving forward with it. I understand why it was necessary at a point in time, but moving forward with it is just, that part is toxic for me.
Guys, you want to add something?
There's so many hands that want to go up.
Okay, I only have a chance for one more question, and I saw his before. But my last 2 cents on this is actually what I was going to say about what should the next generation, should we be raising them up with? For me, it's consistency, discipline, and values. That's it. Be consistent in what you do, be disciplined, and then know what your values are, so that when you walk into an environment, you can say, I worked harder, I deserve it. Period. Yeah. One more question up here up front, and then we'll round out the conversation.
I'll try to make it quick. Firstly, thank you so much. This has been so inspiring to hear all of your stories. For me, something that I really struggle with as a first-generation South African born post-apartheid, I actually remember my parents moving us from our then, what I didn't even know back then was a black neighborhood into a white neighborhood, and then kind of it was downsizing because we had a big house in what was then the ghetto, so to speak, but then moving into a white neighborhood, we moved into a 2-bedroom flat, and I was like, what happened? We had a big house with a big garden. But I do recall that indeed, similar to what the lady said over there, that, there was always this pressure from my parents to say, you have to, I went to private school, predominantly white school. My parents also made me do subjects that I didn't choose, so I had to do maths, I had to do science, I had to do all of these, and today I'm a creative, so, in the end, it really was a change for me of like following my passions. But I guess one thing that I came to understand is that it also has a lot to do with how Black history is told. I think a lot of the times Black history is told through the white gaze, and the way the history books are written is not written in a way for us to celebrate all of these amazing Black people that existed. I think if you look at the US, a lot of influential Black people made advances in medicine and in every aspect of culture. And then if you look at the continent of Africa, if you look at even like someone like Mansa Musa was like at the time was one of the most powerful, wealthy Black leaders. We don't really get to tell these stories. And so we are today faced with the reality of successful, excellent Black people, but almost kind of viewing that as we now are just becoming that version of ourselves, whereas we have always been that version of ourselves. And this idea of just being able to exist, I think a lot of white people are able to live in mediocrity because it's just also okay and it's fine. But I guess my question is, how do we begin to deal also with all of this trauma? It's important to also establish a way to be able to unpack that generational trauma, to break the cycle, to not pass it on. And I think that this idea of Black excellence is also very much rooted in the sense that if we are excellent, we show that we are the same in some way, or we are as worthy, whereas the worth should not come from our ability to showcase our excellence. We are excellent and we are great, but I think there we also feed into this trauma that stays with us.
So your question is, how do we deal with the trauma from the generational trauma?
How do we begin to start that healing? Also, not just with myself. I mean, I'm doing it day by day, but I think as a community, as a society, we also need to be able to do it as a collective and realize that has a big role to play on why we also face the challenges we face day to day.
Okay.
Yeah, big work ahead. Woo. I think Rome wasn't built in a day, so we have to take time. There's I have this analogy, I'm not an engineer, but I have an analogy of like, based on our experiences, or even not even our experiences, because kind of transgenerational trauma sometimes doesn't have to happen to you to be in you, right? And all of these things still play out in our world today in terms of how we view ourselves, how we view others, and also in like the rules that we kind of live by internally. And I think one of the things that we need to do to kind of work through what you're asking is begin to explore, like, what are the rules that I've maybe been living by, right? What are the dysfunctional assumptions that I've taken on and own, and then start living by them, and then start to ask yourself, how can I adjust them? So I think when I think about rules of like, we should be, the shoulds that we put on ourselves, it's a little bit like a bridge with no give, you know? And as I said, I'm not an engineer, but I feel like most bridges, I remember from school, maybe they're built differently now, but they have to have a bit of like ability to expand, right? Yeah. Because of heat and all these kind of things. And I think we live so rigidly sometimes with the rules and the expectations and the pressures that we put on ourselves based on the history, that we need to think, how can I release some of this? Right, daily, to try to get to that space of healing, and also doing it in community. You talked about being vulnerable. I think the more we can be vulnerable, the more we can be like, I'm not alone in this. So I think, yeah, working on flexibility for yourself, and also gaining community to validate what you've experienced and what you're dealing with each day. And yeah, exactly, like adding compassion, just one drop can go a long way. It can really go a long way.
It definitely can.
Yes, I would just quickly add on to that, because I also agree it's a big task to unlearn trauma. But I would also say, catch yourself, like go deep inside of you, and then kind of catch yourself when you're having this mindset. For example, to bring it back to the example of me being in the show and having to represent a whole community. I had people come up to me and saying, hey, you represented us well, we are proud of you. But then if you have this thought of this girl is representing me or us well, just catch yourself and be like, but why? Why does she have to represent us? Why can't she just not be herself, and not also have this expectation of someone needing to present in a specific way for you to be represented within your community?
Yeah. Wow. All of you.
And can I just say also, just existing is like the biggest healing process, right? To be like, I'm getting up this morning and I'm going out. I'm getting up this morning and I'm gonna be me. I think we have to celebrate these things as part of like healing the trauma that we've all,
definitely
experienced.
Wow. Okay, y'all this was so insightful and great. Can we give them a round of applause, please? I really enjoyed this conversation. This definitely has to be one of my favorite podcast episodes so far. So thank you all for joining. This was phenomenal. And thank you all for participating. It really made the vibe. It really was helpful. Thank you for your amazing questions. It's not over. I saw more hands were raised. Let's keep the conversations going. And thank you again. Well, there you have it, folks. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to On the Up and Up on your favorite streaming and social media channels. And with that being said, onwards and upwards, y'all. And I'll speak to you soon.